Today, we shall be discussing a very important topic in academic writing, writing analysis. And we shall focus upon two important modes of academic writing. One, descriptive writing, and the second, critical writing. Now, before we delve into these two types or modes of writing, it is important for us to address the question that why does writing analysis matter? Is it at all important to engage in an analysis of the style of writing? The answer is that it is extremely relevant to examine these questions. We must understand the type of writing that is required in an academic environment. Firstly, writing analysis helps us to move in the direction of interpretation, evaluation, and argumentation. It moves far beyond the reproduction of knowledge, because what it evinces is a critical engagement, the ability of the student to critically engage with a subject is finally expressed through the kind of writing that he or she produces. So therefore, a level of cognitive engagement must occur in academic writing. That is one of the central or key features of assessment in higher education. Now, we must understand that there are many types or modes of academic writing: descriptive writing, analytical writing, critical academic writing, and persuasive academic writing. But in today's lecture, we shall focus upon the two most important modes of writing, which is descriptive writing and critical writing. Now, what is descriptive writing and critical writing? And what is the relationship between these two types of writing? Are they mutually exclusive, as the name suggests? Or is it possible to synthesize the two types of writing, that is descriptive and critical? Now, when we talk about descriptive writing or critical writing, what we are hinting at or what we are trying to focus upon is the nature of writing that is involved and the process of writing which one must engage in. Among the core competencies in academic communication lies the ability to express oneself clearly and also to distinguish between these two types of writing, descriptive writing and critical writing. Now, descriptive writing is primarily based upon reporting information, while critical writing, on the other hand, is based upon analysis and interpretation. This is the fundamental difference between these two types of writing. Both play an essential role in academic work and scholarly writing. But we often find that there is a dominance of descriptive writing over critical writing. Particularly among college students, this is a challenge: how to balance descriptive and critical writing. Developing critical writing skills has become the central objective of higher education because descriptive writing is not sufficient. On its own, descriptive writing is passive, but critical writing shows an active ability to engage critically and in a more nuanced manner with the subject. Also, what it demonstrates is the ability of the student to think independently. And academic achievement is based on critical writing rather than descriptive writing. So, what is descriptive writing and how do we avoid descriptive writing? Now, we must appreciate that descriptive writing is the foundation of academic communication. One must not completely dismiss descriptive writing. As I mentioned earlier, that academic writing must evince a balance between these two modes, that is descriptive and critical. Of course, one must avoid descriptive writing, particularly while engaging in scholarly or academic discourse. But that is not to say that descriptive writing must be completely dismissed, because it is the foundation of any kind of academic communication. What it demonstrates is an understanding of essential information, and it ensures that the readers are informed about the subject. Before engaging in a deeper analysis, it is important to establish background. While writing any critical answer, before engaging in a deeper or more critical analysis of the subject, it is very important to communicate background information. So, descriptive writing answers certain basic questions such as what, who, when, and where. Mind you, we are not engaging with the question of why, because this is a question that is addressed by critical writing. Descriptive writing merely addresses these questions: what, who, when, and where. And it focuses on the communication of factual content without any interpretation. So it focuses on factual reporting and explanation, and it avoids interpretation and judgment. While writing descriptively, one must understand that an objective tone or an objective and neutral reporting is very important. One cannot engage in any kind of subjective analysis. That is, the mode of address should always be objective. Although we are writing descriptively, we cannot bring into focus the subjective I. It has to be a neutral and an objective tone that is adopted while writing descriptively. One must also focus upon organization. There has to be an organized presentation of factual details. It cannot be disorganized or haphazard, because it will hinder the reading process. Very often, paraphrasing and summarizing are the two techniques that are used, particularly while evaluating scholarly sources. One must refer to scholarly sources, scholarly articles, research articles in academic writing. In descriptive writing, what is done is paraphrasing or summarizing this scholarly material, and therefore providing a clear explanation of the process or the theory or the event. So, for instance, if I am writing a research article, and I must provide a kind of theoretical framework before I engage in analysis, then descriptive writing would be helpful for me, because through descriptive writing, I can establish background. I can clearly summarize the theoretical framework which I shall adopt while writing the research paper. So therefore, in descriptive writing, one must consider the reason why this writing is being done. One must evaluate the reason why the article is being written. One must also consider the audience for the research article. It's important that in descriptive writing, a general overview is provided. There is no need to engage in details. Facts, figures, background information is essential, but minor details, inconsequential, superfluous details must be avoided at all cost. Now, where is descriptive writing used? If we think about an academic answer, we must try to identify the areas in which descriptive writing is suitable. Certainly, in the introduction and the background sections. While writing an academic answer, the introduction or the background section can use descriptive writing. In fact, it is desirable to use descriptive writing. Also, in literature reviews or summaries of theories, descriptive writing is often useful. While writing about historical contexts, while summarizing the author's viewpoints, While reporting data in empirical research, while reporting on data and observations, descriptive writing is commonly used. Also, in every research paper or academic answer, there is a section on methodology or results. This is particularly for the social sciences, for any kind of empirical study. So, descriptive writing is commonly used in methodology and in the results section. Now, to give you an example, to break the monotony and give you an example, suppose there is a sentence. Bloom's taxonomy lists 6 levels of cognitive skills ranging from remembering to creating. Bloom's taxonomy lists 6 levels of cognitive skills ranging from remembering to creating. Let us examine this statement. What is the function of this statement? This statement confirms knowledge, but you see, it does not explain significance or consequence. So it stops at explanation. It does not provide any interpretation. Neither does it provide any critical insight or argument. So this is typically an example of descriptive writing. The descriptive writing is often useful for foundational understanding or foundational knowledge. Now, there are various cognitive levels which are associated with academic writing. If you refer to the Bloom's taxonomy, which is a model, cognitive level for descriptive writing is usually applicable to remembering and understanding. It is aligned with remembering and understanding. It's a lower order thinking skill, but as I mentioned, it is the foundation for analysis. Students often heavily rely on descriptive writing, particularly in the early stages of their academic career or academic development. This is because, they lack prior experience, prior educational experience, and very often they engage in what is called rote learning, that is memorizing. They are unfamiliar with discipline-specific writing conventions, and therefore they lack the confidence to write critically. So descriptive writing often reflects what students are comfortable in doing because it is aligned with surface level approach. One must develop a deeper and a more critical engagement, moving away from descriptive writing and gradually moving in the direction of critical writing. Now, there is some academic value of descriptive writing. It is not entirely a futile exercise to engage in descriptive writing because descriptive writing demonstrates comprehension and understanding. It ensures clarity and it gives a shared understanding of the subject matter. Also, it helps in improved analysis. If a student has understood the background information correctly, then it is quite likely that he or she will be able to develop a critical argument or a critical analysis. So, descriptive writing is a necessary starting point for argumentation. It is a groundwork. It lays the groundwork for critical academic work and development. It welcomes observation and it promotes contemplation. So therefore, when one is writing descriptively, certain abstract concepts become more concrete, they become more relatable, and it enables a lucid expression of academic ideas. There are various ways in which descriptive writing is used. In academic writing, description-based writing usually occurs in summaries. Very often there is a summary of a text that is provided. Paraphrasing, that is putting forward the researcher's ideas in one's own words. There's a difference between summary and paraphrase. A summary is condensing multiple paragraphs into key points. But paraphrasing, on the other hand, is putting the researcher's ideas into one's own words. Any scholarly article or any kind of scholarly debate which is expressed in one's own words is called paraphrasing. Descriptive writing relies heavily on enumeration, that is listing themes or historical development or a historical sequence, description of processes, that is how a method or an event occurred, and finally, descriptive writing is also expressed through definition, that is clarifying a particular terminology or explaining a certain framework. Now, there are limitations to descriptive writing because it does, as I said, it does not demonstrate independent thinking. There is the lack of argumentation or academic purpose. And also, it often results in lower assessment outcomes. If I write an answer which is wholly or completely based upon descriptive writing, it will imply that there is a lower assessment outcome as compared to an answer which shows my ability to think and engage critically with the text. So therefore, this is where critical writing comes into play. Critical writing involves interpretation. It involves evaluation and judgment. And it addresses the question why and how. These are the two important questions that critical writing addresses: why and how. And it engages actively with scholarly debates. Remember that critical writing is not one that occurs in isolation. There has to be, the prerequisite for critical writing is reading. Only when one reads scholarly articles, research articles, only then can one develop critical thinking. There are certain key features or chief characteristics of critical writing that often distinguish it from descriptive writing. Now, firstly, while writing critically, the student must be clear. So clarity is a very important feature of critical writing. The writing must convince the reader. It must be convincing. It must be lucid and clear. Also, the language must be sparse. The language must be to the point. It is important to stick to the points instead of digressing from the subject. Also, critical thinking or critical writing depends on analysis. There has to be a section which analyzes the subject or the text. And in analysis, it is important that the student selects important points only and forms a logical progression or a logical sequence of ideas. Therefore, in an academic answer, which engages in critical writing, the student must write in paragraphs. It is very important to write in paragraphs because the paragraph will indicate the selection of material. Every paragraph should address a new point, an important point, or it should be a development of a point. And it is important, therefore, in critical writing to use a technique called signposting. Now, what is signposting? Signposting is a technique where we flag up certain important or key ideas in an answer or in an article. So in a paragraph, while beginning a fresh paragraph, it is important to signpost or flag up the argument that will follow. These are some of the key features of critical writing. Because remember, critical writing is essentially aimed at developing an academic argument. There has to be a reasoned persuasion. If I have to convincingly put across my point of view, then I have to do it through the process of argumentation. So there has to be an academic argument that is expressed through critical writing. One must also very clearly demonstrate his or her own position. So the writer must position himself within a scholarly or academic discourse. And one thing that we must understand is that critical writing moves far beyond agreement and disagreement. If there is a critical or a scholarly idea that I am debating, it does not necessarily mean that I have to either agree or disagree. I can evaluate and I can argue my point of view within that particular framework without agreeing or disagreeing. I can evaluate and weigh up the critical idea. I can state my point of view. I can consider available evidence. I can also provide counter arguments. And I can put across a thesis that is original. So these are the advantages of critical writing, that one must not, in critical writing, express either a clear agreement or a disagreement. One can balance the two through critical writing and at the same time express one's own point of view. Now, critical writing, you see, addresses several important questions. Questions such as how reliable is the evidence? When we are writing an answer or when we are writing an academic article, there is a lot of evidence, a lot of scholarly material that we are referring to. But critical writing enables us, it is a process through which we can ascertain the reliability of that information. There are various assumptions to claims that are made. Critical writing helps us to examine the assumptions that underpin the claims that are made. Also, through critical writing, one can arrive at the implications or the consequences of a research work. We can also, through critical writing, establish relatability. What is the relatability between ideas or different contexts? So, to repeat, critical writing is aligned with analysis, evaluation, and it represents a higher order cognitive skill. It also indicates in a student a degree of intellectual maturity. Argumentation, as I mentioned, is a very important aspect of critical writing. One of the essential features of critical writing is argumentation. And as I said earlier, an academic argument is not a disagreement, but it is a structured and persuasive line of reasoning. In academic discourse, you see, critical writing signifies the ability to analyze, research, and position oneself vis-a-vis the existing scholarly material or the existing scholarly voices. And critical writing, therefore, is a very important way of constructing meaning. It is not merely the reproduction of meaning, but it is constructing new meaning. Academic argumentation consists of several key features. When writing an argument, one must keep in mind that there has to be a defensible thesis, a clear and defensible thesis that expresses, that articulates the writer's stance or the writer's viewpoint. If I am writing an academic answer or an academic article, I must keep in mind that there is a clear and a defensible thesis that I will present, and it will articulate my point of view or my stance. Next, critical writing, which relies upon argumentation, is also based on logical reasoning. Logical reasoning is important, you see, because it establishes meaningful links between the claim and the evidence. If I make a claim, I have to substantiate it. I have to back it up with evidence. This link between the claim and the evidence will showcase my ability to logically reason. And that is a key feature of argumentation in critical writing. Also, while writing an academic answer, if I am using critical writing, then I must keep in mind alternative perspectives and counter arguments. I cannot propose my thesis as one that is infallible. I have to take into consideration counter arguments and other perspectives. And finally, critical writing and argumentation must have a well-reasoned conclusion. In an academic answer, there has to be a well-reasoned, a well-established conclusion. That is the way in which critical writing becomes more effective. It's important that we synthesize descriptive and critical writing. Critical writing requires an ability to synthesize rather than merely catalog or list scholarly viewpoints. While reading an academic answer, if I simply list the kind of scholarly and critical views, then it is not sufficient. Cataloging or listing is not sufficient. Critical writing must synthesize. It must bring together diverse scholarly viewpoints. So synthesis involves identifying relationships between ideas. The ideas in an academic answer cannot be disconnected. In the first paragraph, I cannot state what a particular scholar has said, and in the second paragraph, I cannot move on to another scholarly viewpoint without bringing the two into dialogue, without bringing the two into perspective. In that case, the academic answer would be a string of disparate ideas with no relationship with one another. So synthesis is a very important aspect of critical thinking and critical writing, because critical writing brings together diverse scholarly viewpoints. This synthesis involves identifying relationships and shaping a concrete argument, an independent scholarly viewpoint. It can be shaped, can be formed through the synthesis of various ideas. So integrating multiple scholarly viewpoints, identifying agreement and contradiction, helps us to construct new meaning into existing research. Now, an important question: which of these terms is not applicable for critical writing? And I have 4 options. Option A, evaluation. Option 2, comparison. Option 3, argumentation. And option 4, cataloging. And yes, you guessed it right. The option is 4, cataloging. Cataloging is not applicable for critical writing. It is excluded in critical writing, while evaluation, comparison, and argumentation organically form a part of critical writing. Now, to bring descriptive writing and critical writing into focus, we must establish that descriptive writing and critical writing are not mutually exclusive. Descriptive and critical writing function interdependently. There is descriptive writing and critical writing, both of which together can help us with effective academic writing. Descriptive elements in an academic answer provide context. They demonstrate familiarity with existing scholarly material and the subject matter, while critical elements, interpreted by the writer, an in-depth knowledge or analysis of the text, is evident through critical writing. So therefore, descriptive and critical writing have a close relationship with one another. While descriptive writing provides context, critical writing constructs meaning. And an effective mode of writing will integrate both descriptive and critical writing strategically. Good academic writing relies on building a bridge between descriptive writing and critical writing, between descriptive comprehension and critical reasoning. So you see, without description, arguments become unsupported and the writing becomes confusing or unfounded. Likewise, without any criticism, the writing becomes passive and superficial. So you see, the objective is not to eliminate descriptive content, but to minimize or to use it intentionally in a way that will enhance the critical analysis. So descriptive writing can be understood as a precursor to critical analysis. While beginning an answer, descriptive writing is often helpful. Think about the structure of an essay. The introduction, which provides context, could be descriptive, while the main argument that follows later could be critical. Let us think about the paragraphs in an answer. The body of the answer can begin with a summary of evidence, which is again a form of descriptive writing. And then, once that has been stated, the student can move on to an evaluation of evidence, which is a form of critical writing. And finally, in the conclusion of an answer, there is the synthesis and the implications and consequences which are established, which is again a kind of critical writing. So you see, I have just explained that in a structure of an essay or in a structure of an academic answer, there is the need to use both descriptive as well as critical writing. To finally conclude with a question, what are the challenges of descriptive writing? What are the challenges of descriptive writing? A. Writing critically and evaluating material. B. Mentioning factual information. C. Establishing disciplinary and cultural material. And D. Writing to develop upon background. And the answer is A. Developing a critical argument. This is a challenge of descriptive writing. We can do all of the rest. We can establish background, we can provide context, give disciplinary and cultural material that we can foreground in descriptive writing, but it is difficult to frame an argument and to develop on an argument in descriptive writing.